What's poppin', people? It's Dante. This morning I'm thinking about photography and how certain photo books have inspired me. And I'm going to be sharing with you the behind the scenes of my photographs and also diving deeper into some of the works that I have in my collection. So I find that photo books are really good resources for photographers, especially when you're just getting started. One of the things that I did early on in my photography journey was to pick up a few photo books and to really study them intimately and to get to know why certain photographers made decisions when it comes to composition. And I think this is important to highlight because when I look at a photograph, I do analyze the frame in a particular way that resonates with me. You know, I'm not necessarily looking at photo books for the collection of the photographs as much as I do appreciate the body of work in a photo book. What I've done early on to sort of emphasize the way in which I can learn is by really dissecting particular images and why I enjoy them. And so by doing this process of looking at photo books and looking at photographs that you deem to be good, you can then go out into the world and make photos that you believe to be good. And understanding certain compositional elements that put a frame together and make them compositionally sound, I believe is critical as photographers. And so let's get on into it. Let's pass by the photo walls. And so, yeah, let's get right into it. I have a few photo books laid out here and we're gonna talk about them. So here's a few photo books. We've got Susan Meiselas, Nicaragua, Alex Webb, Larry Towell, Joseph Koudelka, William Klein. And so these are just a few of the photo books from my collection and a few of the photographs that I have laid out here that I'm going to dive into and talk about. And yeah, these are some of the books and some of the works that I have in my collection. I do have a variety of photo books here and like to look at them from time to time. And so yeah, let's get right into it. First and foremost, Larry Towell's book, The Mennonites, is my favorite photo book of all time. And this is one of the bodies of work that I really dived into that inspired me heavily. And the thing that I really appreciate about Larry Towell's work is not only are the photographs visually compelling and compositionally sound, but there's an emotional intimacy in the photographs. So not only is he physically close to the people that he's photographing, in this particular scene we have three girls, the dog coming by, and the relationship to the background of this beautiful barn. You know, you have a setting here that really sets the scene. But there's an intimacy to the photographs in this body of work that elevate the photographs to a new height. And that's what I've really picked up from Larry Towell's process. It's the documentary approach. You know, Larry Towell's documentary approach to photographing life, I believe, provides this emotional, impactful view into a new world. And through the photographic process of Larry Towell engaging with this community on an intimate level, he was able to come home with these amazing photographs that describe the life of the Mennonite community. And here in this image in particular, the reason why I really enjoy this photograph and think it's extremely strong is we have so many different elements that bring your eye throughout the frame. You know, we have this gesture of the girl in the car window who's looking up into the sky, maybe looking up at the light. I'm not really sure what they're looking at, but it adds a bit of mystery to the frame. And your eye really does wander throughout this picture. We have so many different elements, from the girls in the foreground to the dog and the chickens in the background. And of course, the composition is sound and the layers are really strong because of the use of the foreground, middle ground, and background of the barn in the back there. You know, there's something about the way he breaks the frame up that I really resonate with in this frame particularly. And I find that not only is his approach something meaningful for me and has inspired me in my journey, but the compositions that he makes are just amazing. And so that's a great example of Larry Towell's work. There's a number of photographs in this book that I can reference, and the entire body of work is extremely strong. I actually made a flip through of all of these books. So if you're interested in looking at the full body of work, if you go to my YouTube channel, it's just youtube.com/street photography. If you type that in the URL or just click on the name or whatever, and you scroll to the bottom of my homepage, I did make a playlist of my photo books. And so any of the photo books I'm referencing here, I'm sure you can find other resources online. I made full flip throughs so that you can look at them. Here we have a photograph of Bresson, and this photograph was taken, I believe, during or after the Spanish Civil War. And the photograph, to me, is not only visually impactful, but emotionally engaging. And that's going to be a common theme with a lot of these photographs that make me inspired by them. And so we not only have this visually compelling image of the frame within a frame and the compositional technique of including the frame of this war-torn and tattered wall, but we have the juxtaposition of the children in the background playing with resilience during this trying time. And this is something that I personally resonate with, and something I carried over with me during my journey photographing in numerous communities throughout the world, specifically in places like Palestine or all the different cities in the West Bank and Jericho. And I found that the resilience of the youth, despite the circumstances that they're living in, is something really uplifting in a photograph. There's something about this war-tattered wall, the wear and tear of the wall, but the smiles and the joy of the children and the sort of innocence within their facial expressions and the way that they're playing at this particular scene. But the way that Bresson decided to frame this composition is genius, and something that I definitely have in the back of my head when I'm out there in the streets, recognizing how you can juxtapose different elements to create something visually impactful. But not only visual impact, I think there's something deeper than just the visuals in these photographs. And hopefully that's something that you can dissect yourself when you look at a photograph. And for me, that's the reason why I appreciate this photograph by Bresson. And so this photograph is from Susan Meiselas, photographing in Nicaragua during conflict, and I am very inspired by war photography. One of my favorite photographers was James Nachtwey, as he photographed a number of conflict zones. But Susan Meiselas' work here is vibrant with its color, and a lot of the images are graphic, raw, and visceral. And honestly, I'm inspired by the courage of photographers. I'm inspired by the way that photographers are fearless. I've always appreciated the quote by Robert Capa, your photos aren't good enough, you're not close enough, storming the beaches during D-Day, getting close to the action in World War II. Photographs like this from the front lines of conflict have been a big inspiration in my life, as I've photographed similar conflict experiences, not as intense as this one, but definitely something that I always have been inspired by. I think courage is one of the traits that a photographer must possess. Now, when we come over to this photograph by Alex Webb in his book, The Street, I find that this photograph is visually compelling and emotionally engaging. This photograph to me is an example of perfection in composition. And you might be wondering, is there even such thing as perfection? Well, I don't know. This might just be the closest thing to it. And so I absolutely love this frame. I think that there's so many different elements that tie it together, not only from the foreground element of the girl and the boy engaging emotionally together, but the left-hand side of the frame with the man covering his face with the magazine, and of course the background silhouette of the man with his daughter in hand, and the arch where the light is peering through this little alleyway here. I mean, there's so many different little bits and pieces, from the signage on the wall to the sliver of this area on this column, that really tie the frame together visually, that is so compelling. But what I have to emphasize with a lot of these photographs is not only are they visually compelling, but they're emotionally engaging. The approach of William Klein is one of the photographers. Not only is it visual, are the visuals of Klein and the compositions stark and punchy. Not only is he physically close to his subjects, but William Klein's approach to the streets and his raw and visceral attitude is one of the things that I picked up on early on in my photography journey. I wasn't afraid to engage with the streets in a complex way, where not only did William Klein photograph candidly on the streets of strangers, but he wasn't afraid to interact at certain scenes and to almost egg people on. And so in this photograph of the boy with the gun, the boy is shooting the gun back at him, but when he made this photograph, he was egging the boy on and told him to look tough, and he wound up responding to William Klein's instructions and actually photographing it. And some people would argue that interacting with the scene doesn't resonate with them in terms of what street photography is, but I think that a lot of the notions of what street photography is and isn't is actually kind of foolish, because there's so many nuances on how a human being interacts on a street. And so actually I find that when you're on the street, I'm not someone who likes to pose a photograph at all. I won't necessarily say that that's the approach that you should adopt as a photographer, but to pick up on William Klein's intimate sort of approach where he's not afraid to engage, right? So like in this photograph, obviously he has permission. Obviously, Klein had permission to make this photograph at this close proximity. I don't think that this photograph was made without him interacting at the scene. And at the end of the day, that's what I'm trying to pick up on here is, yeah, don't be afraid to ask for permission. Don't be afraid to be playful on the streets. You know, this photograph here is a great example from Klein that showcases joy. This photograph, I think, is so strong. Not only is it a joyous photograph with the women's smile, but he really dialed in the layering here from the foreground, middle ground, and background. Moving on to Joseph Koudelka, we have this image, and this is from the book Exiles. And this book, this is a great example for me on not only layering and putting together a composition visually, but there's something about the timing that's just perfect. And a lot of what great composition comes down to is the position of the photographer in relationship to the subject and the background. And what that means is you need to make sure that where you position your physical body is going to allow you to put the puzzle pieces together. And so when I think about a composition, I think about it as a visual problem solving, where you're looking at the different puzzle pieces in life and trying to plug them together to make something sound. And so with the timing of this moment of the man throwing the ball in the air, maybe it's an apple, looks like a ball. Yeah, it's like a ball. And so as he's throwing the ball in the air, he clicks the shutter at the perfect time with the horizon in the background, allowing for this horse to be visible against the sky, allowing this shed in the background to be visible in the sky, allowing the ball with that timing to be visible from the sky. Right, just like imagine, right, if he were to photograph from a different angle, from a different vantage point, if the ball was being hidden from the grass in the background, you wouldn't be able to necessarily see the impact of this composition and the timing of this moment. And so there's something about the visual problem solving that Koudelka used in that particular moment that I find interesting. And all of the photographers here have used certain elements that I'm discussing about this moment in Koudelka's photograph to achieve these kind of compositions of visual problem solving. Some are better than others. And so with that, maybe we can dive into some of the other photographs as I look through some of Klein's photos, but there's also images from Bresson that are not only reliant on the compositional elements of form and shape and lines and geometry that he's famous for, but there's also this very emotionally engaging aspect of Bresson's work where these women outside are engaging in some sort of like haircut or salon, and the woman looking back at you into the camera lens is so impactful, and there's this strong connection between the photographer and the subject. And so I think this is something that is overlooked when it comes to making strong street photographs. Is you want to have not only a close proximity to your subject when you're photographing, but you also want to have this emotional closeness. You want to have this intimacy with the subject you're photographing where you feel connected to the subject in the image that you review. And so this is a similar kind of moment actually that I can reference from one of my photographs in Mumbai, where we have a mother and a daughter, and they were grooming, she was grooming her hair, brushing her hair and combing her hair. They're outdoors and, on this sort of side of the road by a railroad, right? And you feel an emotional sort of connection to the subject. There's an intimacy here. There was permission here. There's this closeness here that's not only physical, but also emotional. And yeah, I think not only do we want to make visually stunning images and have the timing and the moment sort of come together with the click of the shutter, but we want to have this intimate feeling in a photograph for it to be a strong photograph. And this, this is also something that isn't tried and true. This is also something that doesn't have to necessarily be in every single photograph you make. But I'm just sharing from my personal experience and my idea of what makes a great photograph. And yeah, that's pretty much it, honestly. Because there are certain images that are reliant on the visuals alone. There are certain images from this book by Alex Webb here 30 years of photographs in Mexico, not Mexico City, that I appreciate. You know, we have this moment here, this random moment, this timing at the scene from a distance that's, in my opinion, more reliant on the visual elements and the visual impact of the beautiful colors, the pink and the blue and the hues, you know, that beautiful gradient in the sky. But of course, the cherry on top being the man who's going to jump and his shadow that's being casted on the wall. And so there is something about the visual impact of a photograph, the graphic elements and the geometry and form that break the frame up. And this is an example of one of those moments that are really striking visually and very engaging as a visual feast when you look through the photograph, not only from the foreground, but to the middle ground and the background. And there's something beautiful in finding a decisive moment, and the timing required to make these moments are what bring the frame together. And I think that is something that's very common in a lot of street photographs, right? It's reliant on timing. You know, the timing is extremely critical. Being quick to respond to life with your intuition. And as much as we see the world with our vision, I mostly photograph through my intuition, through my gut. You know, I think that's something important to highlight here. And we can maybe look through some more work. Actually, maybe one of the photographs that I made is very interesting because it is similar to this photograph by Koudelka, and I think it may be kind of fun to review. It's actually, I think, it's pretty much a B-side image, in my opinion. I don't know if it's a great photograph of the wall. I have better images of the wall here in the West Bank, but this photograph is quite interesting. When I made this image, and reviewed this image when I got home, I was like, whoa, that's kind of like Koudelka's. I actually thought of that after I made this photograph, because I've had this, you know, visual sort of diet from these certain photographers that I have laid out on my bed here. And so when I make photographs, I oftentimes can reference in my head, you know, early on, what makes these photographs great, and then how I can apply them in actual scenes. But yeah, here's the image that I made. We have the horse and some of these Palestinian youth that are playing by the wall, and at this moment, I pretty much timed it perfectly as the horse swoops the tail there and the boy throws the bottle in the air. And yeah, it reminded me of this photograph by Koudelka. Of course, Koudelka's photograph is way stronger and way more engaging, and that's why, honestly, this is pretty much just a B-side. But there's still something interesting to draw here with the way in which I related the foreground and background and the timing of the moment. But to me, it's a bit sloppy, and I think that it's not as visually engaging as something like this by Koudelka. And so I find that being intimate, remaining close to life, it's one of those things that I really dialed in on, you know, because a lot of these photographers, they get close. And I've always wondered, how do they get so close to life? How do they get close to these particular scenes? And so one of my secrets, I love it, call it a secret. One of my secrets is to carry an Instax camera when I travel. And so when you have an Instax camera, the camera really does become this passport that unlocks the door. And not only is it going to unlock metaphorical doors through experiences that you have and engaging with people with this gift of the photograph, right? The gift of photography, it becomes this universal language where, despite language barriers, you can always gift an Instax print, and people will smile and appreciate that you're giving people a photograph, and it will allow you access to certain scenes to make photographs and have this sort of intimate approach through the documentary approach. And yeah, I think this is something to just reference here. As you can see, I photographed at this particular scene, and actually this photograph of the wall can remain because the place where this woman lived was within the walls of Shofat refugee camp in East Jerusalem. And as you can see, I made this portrait with the Instax camera. I was using the Instax wide Fujifilm, and yeah, I gifted the photograph to the family. I believe I believe they wanted to feed, I think we had some food, some snacks, some tea, some coffee. And yeah, I wound up having a photo of me taken laying in their living room, right? Like we spent, like a good half hour at least at this particular scene. And this would happen to me frequently. And this happened to me so frequently during my journey because I was open and playful and not taking myself so seriously. I always wear a smile on my face and have this Instax camera ready to go. And I always give photos to people that I meet. And so while this isn't necessarily one of my greatest photographs, this is a great example, though, of how I've utilized some of these techniques to, not even like techniques, I would mostly say it's an approach, how I've used this approach to make these more intimate photographs, right? Where I'm inside somebody's home. I have the opportunity to make a photograph that's intimate on this emotional level where the woman in the foreground is gazing back at you and you have this connection to the subject in the photograph. But you can also combine these different elements in a frame that create a story. And so this woman is standing or sitting next to her mother, and her son is standing or sitting next to her on the left-hand side, and their ancestors are on the wall on the top left corner of the frame. And so you have this intimate story that you can create through looking at the different elements and getting intimate at the scene. And that's an example to share how the use of an Instax camera and the approach of shooting in this documentary style can give you access to these intimate scenes to make photographs on the level of some of these masters of photography. And yeah, there's a number of photographs that I've made of conflict situations. That's something that I was inspired by in terms of, Susan Meiselas, James Nachtwey. Some of these photographs that I made have been some of my best work of all time, I believe. And yeah, it comes through courage. It comes through spending time in certain places. And honestly, a lot of these things just happen candidly, and I was just kind of there with my camera. Yeah, here's another image of conflict that I like. What else? And so this is, when I shared the image of the woman there in the West Bank and, the girls here in Mumbai, I become consistent, right? I become consistent with my vision and the decisions that I make when I'm in a certain situation. I become consistent with my photographic process when I have this visual palette, when I have this diet of great photography. So when I approach a new place, I can always engage in this nuanced way that is consistent throughout the different locations I photograph in, where it does not matter where I am in the world. I know that I can always make a photograph that's resonating with me visually, right? Where, I don't know if that makes sense. Like, essentially you can develop a style this way, is what I'm trying to say, actually. And yeah, there's some photo at the end of my trip in Mumbai that's very similar to some of the other works, where I'm intimate at the scene. I'm photographing at a close proximity. And yeah, by remaining open and playful, you can make photographs like this and get close to life. It's very similar to this image here. And so I can remain consistent with my process when I'm engaging at these certain locations, despite where I may be. I've even got a photograph. It's kind of funny. We got a theme here going with the woman and the sort of the girls, but I think it's kind of interesting because it's a good example of how I engage with life, where I'm inside this home here photographing a similar scene. I actually prefer the photograph of the girls outside on the street, or on the beach rather, over this photograph, despite this having you know, a nice little story going, and it's strong compositionally, and there's a good layering going on. I do like the other photograph because to me, and so this is actually perfect. This is the perfect example. So with the photograph I showed you from the West Bank of this particular scene of the woman, and the photograph I'm showing you here of this scene of the woman applying the makeup, the reason why I consider these moments to be, you know, B-sides is because the aesthetics that I came home with when I look at the photo visually, right? Visually, this to me feels too much like photojournalism. You know, when you have the documentary approach, I think it's important to try your best to not make a photograph look too journalistic. And that's something very nuanced. That's something very difficult, but it's something that I believe I've mastered. Although I'll still have results like this that when I look back at it, I don't like it visually. To me, there's something visually off. Whereas the girls that were playing on the beach, to me, have a much more, you know, street aesthetic to it, in my opinion. And so that's some of the thoughts on like the visual dynamics and why I appreciate certain photographs over the others. Yeah, it seems like I'm in my Mumbai folder. I showed you some of the images from here in the West Bank, maybe in relationship to Koudelka. I think actually the image that I made of the wall in Shofat, of this wall here, is very much about the timing, and the shadow play is very interesting because it's very similar to the way in which Alex Webb made this photograph, and you have that interesting sort of shadow play here. And so this image is one of my favorites. It's very mysterious, it's very engaging, and it's very much a photograph that asks more questions than gives answers, if that makes sense, where you wonder what's going on here. There's the, of course, impactful looming wall in the background, and, you know, there's not only a story and a visual impact here, but there's something mysterious about the frame that brings the viewer in and questions things. So I'm also interested in making very simple and visually engaging and impactful photographs like that with the geometry and form, as much as I'm interested in framing and geometry. And so here's the photograph I made in Jericho of this layered scene between the boy in the foreground and the boy in the window with that tire in his hand playing. And this image reminds me of the war-torn wall that Bresson photographed that I showed you initially that I'm having trouble finding in the book. But yeah, I find that photographing in these kind of situations, in these kind of places where you're on the border, you're on the edge of life, you're in these conflict zones, you're in these areas that have something to say in the photographs you make, are going to elevate the photograph based on that fact alone. And so I've always made sure when I travel to places that I travel to not only visually interesting places, but also, I'm going to give up, but also I find that towns that are on the outskirts, right? Like Jericho is the lowest elevated city in the world. It's the lowest and oldest inhabited city in the world. It's and this particular part of Jericho, it's you're on the border, right? It's a border town, and a lot of the photos, and so you'll see like the wall in the photo, or you know, this wall in the photo, and you can see that it's like under construction. Things are going, you know, things are changing, and here we have photographs from Alex Webb. You know, he's on the border. You know, some of Alex Webb's best work lie in these towns and in these places that are on the border, that are on the edge, that are in the outskirts, that are in these places that are a bit more unknown, and the photographs become more mysterious and interesting visually. And yeah, some of his best work is not only from Mexico, but also from Istanbul, and these places are sort of in between different parts of the world, between the Middle East and Asia, between the border between Mexico. And those are some of the ideas I have about locations and why I decide to photograph in certain locations. Oh, this is funny. Yeah, look. Yeah, yeah, so this is how I started off getting into these sort of situations in Jericho. I started to walk around with the Instax camera, and a lot of the families loved when they would see photographs that I made. They appreciated it, and that's how I had the permission to just walk around there, and everybody trusted me and loved me. You know, because I got to spend time and actually sit down with a lot of the people there in the community and talk with them and drink coffee with them and all that kind of stuff. All that kind of stuff. Yeah, here we have a gun photo. The gun photo is interesting. You know how many gun photos I've made? Which is crazy. This is the thing. You become consistent. You become consistent. You see things throughout the entire world consistently. You know, we got the gun photo by William Klein, of course. You know, these are some of those like tried and true sort of like little like things, you know, like the playful youth, you know, these sort of like themes of the playful youth you'll see carried out throughout a lot of my imagery. And that's just something that I was always drawn to. I think that, yeah, there's something about the youth and sort of innocence and playfulness of youth that always have resonated with me in certain places in the world. And not even to mention a lot of the places that I traveled to, that was the primary subject to photograph, because that's what's available on the streets a lot of the times in these communities. And so here's another image. So I have a photo here from Jericho, the gun, and we have the playful element of the shadow in the background of the girl on the swing, and there's all these shadows and this beautiful light. And yeah, this is another impactful gun image, and it's kind of tricky to decide, like which one do I like more. Frankly, I think that this photograph is more striking. I think that the image is better because of the way that the composition sort of draws you around the frame. Of course, there's not as many elements when it comes to the light and shadow play, but I think that the gesture of the boy in the bottom left looking up towards the gun is actually much more visually impactful than the boy's hidden smile. I like that this photograph has this sort of blend of seriousness and playfulness, whereas this photograph almost feels too playful. And so that's why I like the image by Klein, because it feels much more serious. And so I wonder if I have anything else to share. Okay, so yeah, this is a test book. Now let me share just a few more things here, actually. Maybe this could be interesting to look at how I've developed my visual sort of way of seeing after engaging with lots of great work and having this sort of diet of photos that I appreciate, and then going out into the world and spending time in places and making photographs and making these sort of compositions and these moments come to life. I think the reflection here at this scene is not only interesting through the mirror of the car or the mirror of the motorcycle, but we also have this geometry going on. We also have this play between the shape of the mirror and the shape of the man's helmet and the gaze looking back at you and the different elements that break this frame up from the right to the left and all throughout the frame that's scattered. And yeah, I think that playing with layering, playing with these sort of reflections and mirrors and things can become an interesting dynamic to work with on the streets if done well. I think this is an example of it being successful. It is kind of difficult to pull off, but that's a visual trick and something that people like to do on the streets. Here's an interesting moment between the boy and the mirror. There's actually a few different pictures from Larry Towell that uses this technique, and I think that it's a visually engaging sort of thing to look for when you're shooting on the streets. Yeah, using reflections to your benefit. Actually, this is another great example of intimacy in a photograph that I appreciate. Where was it? Here we go. Yeah, looking from the inside to the outside with the baby in the hands, the man in the background looking in, and the cow on the left-hand side. Yeah, there's something about the intimacy in these photographs that really resonate with me. You know, they're not only visually strong, but they're emotionally impactful. And that's something I'll repeat endlessly because I think that's the key to making successful photographs. Oh, shit. And so, yeah, just some random photos. This is another great example of making something visually interesting, sort of making something from nothing, right? There's not much going on here. You know, there's a boy in the background playing with that rope. There's a boy in the foreground playing with a stick, but the colors and the different ways in which the lines sort of match together and the shadow play come together, fill the frame with visual dynamics that make it interesting, from the silhouette in the foreground and the gesture to the lines in the foreground and the background and the shadow that's looming on the wall. You know, there's a couple of different elements here that are visually interesting and visually striking that make this frame successful. And so, of course, timing is critical. Similar to this ball being thrown in the air, you have to be on your toes and responding through your intuition, as a lot of the street is out of your control. A lot of the street is happening spontaneously. And I think another great example to pair up between these two photos, between this photo of Koudelka and the layering there with the moment and the timing, is perhaps this photograph here from Mumbai, India. I wonder if I could even pull it up on my iPad. It might be better to look at it that way. Okay. So maybe we can end it with this one. I think, yeah, I'll show you some more stuff. These are just random ideas. Love this photo. Again, spending time. Ahmed and Muhammad, two of my best buds, man. These guys were so cool. Every morning I would go to Muhammad's house in the background. He's in the background in the water. I would knock on Muhammad's door. Lighting sucks. I would knock on Muhammad's door. Every single morning, he would tour me around. He would take me to Hassan's house. We would drink tea and coffee. We would spend the entire day with Hassan. I would spend the whole morning, not even making photos, but just kind of like hanging out, right? And I watered Hassan's plants. You know, I would go into his backyard, and this old man had a breathing machine, and he was, you know, ill, but he kept smoking cigarettes anyway. And we would chat with him, and he was one of the people in Jericho that spoke English, so I would go to him every day, and he was like a mentor to me in a way in the city, and would water his plants. And I remember being with Mohammed and Ahmed every day with this man, and it was kind of funny. We would we would like have like a competition because he had a lemon tree, and we would see who can eat a full lemon, or just like eat lemons and just be joking and laughing and just like smiling because we're eating these like lemons and they were just really sour. So I'm just really playful when I photograph, but then through that playfulness and through that spirit of play, yeah, you go on an adventure of a lifetime. And you know, in this particular moment, we were hiking in between the Wadi Kelt mountain range in the valley where the water is flowing. I believe this is the river that is like biblically historic, the river that flowed from like Jerusalem to Jericho or something. I'm not 100% sure, but yeah, now it's like kind of dried up, but we were walking around there, and then we were, you know, just like enjoying ourselves. And you know, through time spent, I wound up making this photograph, and a lot of the photographs happen this way. You know, if I go into some of the photos I made during my trip with my brother, I wasn't there to photograph. I was here in the scene at this beautiful situation in Napoli, photographing the watermelon, photographing these men, and it happened naturally. It happened spontaneously. It happened with time spent at the scene. It happened with me and my brother sunbathing for hours, and then a photograph appeared. I wasn't hunting and searching. I was enjoying and living, and through that lust for life and enjoying life and just having a good time and being joyous through that spirit of play, you will make incredible photographs. This is something that I've always stayed true to throughout my process. You know, not necessarily taking it so seriously, but just always being there and being prepared with my camera to make the photographs, and not being afraid to photograph what's closest to you. You know, even this photograph that I made is simply through hanging out with my own personal family on my rooftop and photographing my grandmother as she's sunbathing, right? So there's something to be said about intimacy, closeness, and sort of photographing what's actually closest to you on a personal level too. Okay, let's get back to that last example. Actually, I still have some more shit I want to share. All right, so yeah, back to the drawing board. We got the photograph from Koudelka. Perfect timing moment. You know what? Let's critique Koudelka. This is too perfect. Let's talk shit. Koudelka's photograph in this particular moment is too perfect for me. I want to show you a better example of, because Koudelka's work is not necessarily all about perfection. He's got this raw approach to his photographs that I appreciate. The punchy high contrast, the wonky compositions. Not only is he good with composition, but he finds these mysterious moments as well. And something about the photographs he make aren't necessarily always going to be like this image. So I feel like it's best for me to just flip through and emphasize that this is a particular image that I pulled out to talk about timing. Although, again, he does make perfect compositions. Anyways, I just want to share more from him. All right. Timing and layering at this scene. What I noticed when I approached this particular moment along the outskirts in Mumbai by the beach, where there was hardly many people. I remember spending a lot of time just wandering along the beach, just wandering by myself and, just alone. And it was evening, and I would oftentimes try to find myself on a beach for sunset because the light was beautiful. And a lot of these little villages that are tucked away on the beach are so beautiful and vibrant with colors on the wall. And so I would walk through this little neighborhood, and you're kind of just walking through people's homes, basically, and you're extremely intimate at certain scenes. And when I engaged this family that were hanging out, I noticed so many different dynamics that came together in the frame after playing and making some photographs. And so, of course, we have the timing of the moment of the boy throwing this sort of basketball up in the air, but we also have a couple different layers and dynamics that tie the frame together, from the foreground of the boy looking at you in the camera to the man in the back left corner, and the green color sort of matching the green color on the wall, the dog that's in the shadow area sort of coming out, and the Hindu or some sort of religious statue. Actually, I don't know what that is exactly. I should learn what that is. But yeah, it's interesting, not only visually with the color and the popping sort of nature of this frame with all of its saturation, but we do have an element of timing and moment that tie it together. So in order to make photographs like this, you really need to be aware of where to position yourself to make the photograph. When I was photographing at the scene, I noticed how there were a couple of different people, a couple of different things going on. The boy throwing the basketball in the air was the cherry on top and the thing that I was initially interested in. I saw the boy playing with the basketball, and because he was playing with the basketball, I knew that there was a potential moment here. I knew that there was a potential thing to photograph here. And so I got close, positioned myself near the people in relationship to the background, because when I'm approaching something and I'm looking at life, I recognize where to position my body. I recognize where I must be. Like Alex Webb knew that he needed to position himself this way in order to break the frame up, in order to separate the wall from the subject in the moment. And so I needed to position myself in this particular way so that you could have a good relationship between the foreground and the background. And the background, a lot of the times, are what tie these photographs together and what make these photographs strong visually. It's always going to be about the background a lot of the time. Like, the backgrounds are so important. It's like a composition in a photograph becomes like this stage, right? The world is our stage, and the people in the photograph sort of fill those puzzle pieces. And so, of course, photographing the moment of the basketball, but yeah, a lot of the different elements that come together are spontaneous. Like, this dog sort of just came out of nowhere and peered around his ear, and yeah, that became a surprise. And that's what happens when you sort of play at these certain scenes is, yeah, you get these visual surprises, and these things kind of just fall together naturally. And that's because when I photograph through my intuition. I listen to my gut. At this particular scene, I made sure to listen to my gut, to understand the relationship between the foreground and the background, and where to position myself to plug these different pieces together, but then respond intuitively to the bird flying in the background. And so there's a couple of different ideas there that I wanted to discuss in this video. It's getting a bit long here. But maybe now is a good opportunity for me to share a part of my personal journey that has helped me very much. So, when I started off, I experimented with all the different formats. Here I'm shooting with a Rolleiflex or a Rollie, whatever, Mamiya, Rollie, the different, the medium format Johns, all right? I don't really, I didn't like it. needless to say. So I stopped shooting that way, right? I figured out early on, I hate this. This process is way too slow for me. I don't like making pictures medium format. I don't like making these kind of like portrait photos. I think it's kind of just boring. And so I stopped making pictures this way. I stopped shooting in the square format, but I experimented early on. I tried it out. I made notes. I kept a sketchbook. And I think that this is critical to my process, was keeping notes, keeping a sketchbook, looking through my photos and really getting to understand them more by having these visual diaries and having these little things that help me out along my journey. You know, I think that when you catalog your photos in a sketchbook and you see them visually in these thumbnail formats, you can really dissect what photographs work and what photographs don't. And through looking at the photographs this way, you'll be able to sort of learn more and learn faster. And I think that it takes time to get good photos. And yeah, I think that highlighting this as my early work is important. And yeah, I think that it's something that I've always did, you know, even when I was in the West Bank here. These are some of my early sketchbook photos. And, you know, I would always make sure when I get home to print them out and cut them out and put them in a sketchbook so that I can study them later. And so this is how I learned and grew as a photographer, was experimenting and also making these sketchbooks to analyze my own photographs and why I like certain photographs. And then ultimately that work from Baltimore and the West Bank was put together midway through my journey. I received a scholarship to a bookmaking workshop with Alex Webb, and this was the book that I threw together during the workshop just as like a test book. And the sequencing in this book is actually by Alex Webb. So Alex Webb sequenced these photographs of my early work, and after seeing his results of which photographs he liked out of my pictures, I was even, this actually was really helpful, because not only was I able to see how he sequences the photographs and how he makes these stories come to life, which I really appreciate in the way that he sequenced these photos, but also the culling process was really interesting, because I brought over 100 photos, maybe 200, 300, a lot of photos. You know, I have so many images that I brought in these little 4x6 prints, and when I laid them out, he was able to go through all of the images and pick out the ones that stood out to him. And this was helpful to have somebody else look at the work. And I encourage you, if you have somebody that you trust in your life, if you have somebody that you shoot with, or somebody that you appreciate in the realm of photography near you in your town, have them analyze your frames. That way you can see what other people think about the work that you're making, and that will also help you find your style and shape your perspective, because having somebody else look at the work can be a bit more critical as they are detached emotionally from the photographs. And that's what I pretty much came away with from that workshop, was not only the sequencing, but the culling and which photographs he deemed to be better than others. I think I can actually share with you an example of one of his recommendations or suggestions when it comes to picking a photograph that is better than the other and why it matters. So this is just the test book. This is a blurb book, by the way. Blurb is fucking awesome. Yeah, we're gonna do some blurbs. We're gonna blurb it up. Blurb, I'm gonna make more of these, because this is just a test, John. You know, I need the real shit. I want to make a good one, like, or whatever. Like, it's just cool. Like, blurb, good job, blurb. Yeah, blurb is the future. All right, so oh, right. Good example. So I remember at the workshop, I was like, I got two photos that are kind of the same. Which one's better? Early on in Philly. And yeah, it's funny too. I think, is there an example from this book that he has? You know, Alex Webb, he mastered this approach to photographing the kids playing on these trees and things. And I feel like I could never make one that's better, but at least I stole his sort of visual language, admittedly. Here we have a photo that I made here in Philadelphia at Penn's Landing. And it's very similar to this image from Baltimore, as you can see. But the reason we went with this photo, it's obviously supposed to all be from Baltimore anyway, but it's just visually and compositionally more impactful. The emotion of the girl's face looking up. There's something more simplified in this frame that makes it more cohesive. I think the background in this frame is a bit too chaotic. You have too much green and too much elements that are popping out. Of course, the layering is strong and the moment is strong between the boy grabbing the shoe and the boy looking back and the man smoking on the bench in the background. It is a hard pick. It is kind of difficult to decide which one is better in a lot of these situations. Like we looked at the gun and the comparison between the two guns. Honestly, though, but looking at it like this as small thumbnails, you can obviously see the impact that the Baltimore photo has over this. Maybe you disagree, but I actually think that the Baltimore photo has much more engaging dynamics than the frame I made here. Despite there being lots of elements and lots of different things going on, this photograph remains stronger because it's simplified. You know, a lot of the times you think of layer. This is a great example to talk about layering, right? When you think of layering, a lot of people think that you just have to put together a lot of different things going on. But you want to synthesize a frame. You want to simplify a frame to the bare bones where it's very easily readable and legible. And that's what I took away when observing a lot of these photographs throughout my years is which photographs are most simple. You know, a lot of the photographs, while they have layers and dynamics, they're a lot simpler. It's funny. These are so similar. Consistency, right? You can get consistent with your photography through repetition and practice and engaging with the world more and more and more. Now we're going to do the final. This is something I should not share. This is something I should just say, look, I'm not sharing this, but I'm sharing this. I'm sharing this because I want to share and make the point that we all suck, that we all make shitty photos. I still, to this day, make nothing but shitty photos. Half the time, 99% of the time, I'm making shitty photos. But through embracing failure, you can come home with that 1% success. And it's very difficult to make a photograph that describes your vision cohesively. You know, there's too many elements that happen in the world. There's so much spontaneity. And in order to put order to chaos, it's grueling. It's difficult. And to find your style, your voice, it does take experimentation early on. And I wanted to share this random zine I just found, I don't even know where, just in my closet or whatever, of some of the early photos I made around like 2015 and 2016 with my Ricoh GR2 photographing here outside of Municipal Plaza in Philadelphia with a vertical shot, getting extremely close. I remember when I first started taking pictures, I loved Bruce Gilden, I loved William Klein, I loved the sort of raw approach to the streets, and I was like, whoa, these guys are getting so close to people. This is kind of sick. I want to try that. And made some of these early images of the streets, and they're really shitty, and they're not good. This one I think is kind of good. It's kind of good. Got the disposable camera out. Yeah, I would experiment. I would shoot with disposables. I would shoot with flash. I would shoot in a number of different ways early on. And a lot of the work is just bad, honestly. And I think it's good to share this because we all start somewhere. And this is some of the earliest photos that I've made on the streets. It's the cover of my first sketchbook. So we'll end it off with some shitty photos. I think that's important to highlight. The photography journey is endless. I still feel like I'm just getting started. And that's the beauty of this thing. There's so much to do. There's so much to see. There's so much complexity in the world. There's so many experiences you can have. There's so many different ways that you can photograph. There's so many different stories to tell. There's so many different places in the world. You know, the world is open. The world is our canvas. The world is an open world for us to explore. And I always remind myself this very fact when I step out my door, right? I love life, and I love engaging with humanity, and I love being close to people, and I love photographing people, and I love life. And ultimately, I think that's what's going to reflect in the photographs you make. The photograph becomes a reflection of your lust for life and how close to life you become visually and emotionally, you know, physically, emotionally. You know, these ideas I shared with you will hopefully benefit you in your journey. Open to sharing more and going more into depth. Going into more depth with the process of the photos. I'm still calling, still looking, still procrastinating. But that's the thing with this. It's photography is a slow process. Photography requires lots of time spent making pictures, and then the culling of the photos and the process of picking pictures is, yeah, that's, to me, that's just a whole nother thing. But yeah, I recommend you make sketchbooks. Make sketchbooks. Study your photos. Look at the frames you've made over your journey, and pick your favorite ones, and dissect why you like certain photos, and yeah, just print them out in small thumbnails like this. Maybe I can give you a practical suggestion, is to pick up this printer here. It's a Canon Selfie CP 1500, I believe is the name of it. And so you can get printer paper like this. You don't need this big print. This is a big ass printer. This printer is so useful. You can get 108 sheets with ink, 4x6. This is the exact thing I use. I think somewhere on my blog I reference it. You can go to dantesisifo.com, how to make a sketchbook or something. You can Google. Yeah, test ChatGPT. How does let's test ChatGPT. How does Dante make a sketchbook? Shout out to Eli. How does Oh yeah, check it out. Mechanical keyboards are good. I wonder if ChatGPT is Here you go. How does Dante make a sketchbook? Dante's photography sketchbook lightly reflects... Oh, so they don't actually know. They don't actually know. They don't actually know. References blog. We gotta get us on ChatGPT. See, now it's searching. All right, this is it. There you go. Found the information. So maybe you gotta use the ChatGPT search feature. Search the web. I think I should have used that prompting instead. I think that's where I fucked up. I was using the chat or whatever. But there you go. He utilizes the Canon Selfie CP 1500. Boom. Yeah, that's it. And then if you click that, look, it'll take you for a journey, and you can learn how I did it. It's very simple. You get a little sketchbook, you copy and paste photos. Yeah, I give you the links. There's the link. You can click the link. Not sponsored, by the way. Sponsored by Canon Selfie. Check it out. Is the price increased? I don't know if it's always been that much. I feel like it was cheaper. Does that come with ink? This is the ink. This is the paper. See, you can get 216 sheets for $62. It's great. It's a good deal. I suggest it. It's a good idea. You can learn easily. You can use their app, and you can go ahead and use your phone and Bluetooth sequence. Yeah, look at that. Comes right out. Super simple. Very, very fast. Very, very efficient. I suggest it. I think you should try it. All right, enough trolling. Peace, 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 peace. The portable Dante.